Welcome to my live stream vlog Thursday number 441, Virtualization, Endpoint Security, Homelab Q&A. And the virtualization stuff I want to talk about first, because I think this was a really nice write-up by Oliver Lambert. I don't know if it really deserves a video, but it's really just put well. And I want to start out there because, man, I like when I see kind of the philosophical things, because this is something I think about a lot when I talk about like the choice of products, the philosophies behind them. I think that matters. You know, people start doing, as they should. I mean, this is not an unimportant part, feature comparisons that are very technical. And there's nothing wrong with technical feature comparisons. They ultimately are a big piece of the decision making. But I thought this was a cool write-up here on who owns your stack, because it gets deeper into the philosophy behind all of this stuff and comparing what matters. I actually, I sent this to another friend who said he uses emojis a lot. Is that AI? I'm like, actually, he's always used emojis a lot. So if you go through any of the blog posts by Vates, their Zen Orchestra stuff, forever they've been using emojis in there. Matter of fact, if you're wondering why AI uses so many emojis, is because it consumed so much content from people using emojis. It's the same reason M dashes are so popular with AI. People go, oh, I know it's written by AI when there's M dashes. I'm like, clearly you have not spent time consuming newspapers. Journalists like M dashes. It's very popular in journalism. I actually don't use them a lot, but I make sure to specifically avoid them. So every time I type something, I'm not being accused of being AI. It's become kind of an annoying. Someone has accused me of AI several times that I didn't write something or I didn't do something. And I'm like, really? Whatever. I've never in my writing style, not that my writing style is great, used a lot of M dashes. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. I'm used to seeing them, and it, you know, however your style is on there, it is what it is. Back to the topic here before we wandered off the topic. The content here. This is something where people ask me, why not insert name of their favorite tool? And why haven't I taken the time to compare it? And why do I like XCP-NG so much? That really is something brought out here really well and well articulated. And one of the things about the other tools, and this is what he talks about, let's be honest, most comparison tables online are just long lists of features, UI screenshots, or subjective takes on what feels better. And I'm not saying none of that matters, but I think about the philosophy of a lot of how these things work. These two come up a lot. Actually, these three: CloudStack, OpenStack, OpenNebula. There's that, I can't remember if one of these is the ones, SUSE. There's several companies that have these tools, but what makes Zen different than these tools is these are orchestration tools that run on top of other things. Proxmox is included in this list as well. Proxmox is a really great interface for the underlying technology that runs it, and it's very tightly coupled to Debian. I'm a Debian fan, so I didn't know, but Oliver Lambert says he's a Debian fan, so you know I can completely go with that. But they're not really integrated with it. They're relying on, and Proxmox has some security advisories. They do have their own style of doing things, but they're deeply reliant on Debian for everything. And that's one of the things I've just pointed out, that I kind of like that Vates is managing the stack from top to bottom, and that tight integration really shows in how the product works. That's what a lot of this is about, is that philosophy behind there of owning it top to bottom is a lot different than creating an orchestration layer. As a matter of fact, Vates says that's how they started with Zen Orchestra, was just an orchestration layer. They used to not manage the Zen hypervisor underneath at all. Now, all the way on the other side of it, you know, after the 2017, they're a number of years into it of managing the entirety of the stack. And they give a shout out to Azure here. And, you know, and I say Azure, not Hyper-V, because that is where Microsoft is going. Everything's going to be subscription service, pushing you to their cloud. How much longer it sounds like a long time when you say, well, Microsoft's going to support it till at least 2028, but that's 3 years from now. That's you have to start planning now if you plan to change your underpinning virtualization stack. It takes a lot to get that done. And I like that he called out Nutanix. They actually do, and he talks about Nutanix being very coupled, much like Vates is. So kind of a nice shout out for Nutanix, but he points out the same thing I did when people asked me about it. Not just being closed source, but it's the heavy financial structure. The thing he should have pointed out here is the fact that they were up for sale before the VMware thing. They were looking for someone to buy them. And only because VMware got purchased by Broadcom, and that was kind of a windfall, Nutanix is a pretty popular replacement for VMware, that pushed a lot of people towards them. And I think they went from burning cash to maybe making some money. So yeah, interesting. And hopefully, some people will get some of the, philosophies behind some of these and why that matters for a lot of it. But nonetheless, it's something I thought's interesting. You might have found it interesting too. It's linked here, easy enough to find at Vates, or email homelab@lawrencesystems.com if, for some reason you can't figure out where that link is and you can't find it. But nonetheless, it's something interesting, topic of discussion here. Fun stuff to talk about. Hello from Kenya. All right. You only came here a few minutes late. So I'm talking about Zen Orchestra and XCP-NG, and specifically the philosophy behind it. This was and I'll throw it in here, a link just in case you can't scroll back here. It is the virtualize.sh. That is the blog by Oliver Lambert, CEO of, and I think I'm saying his name wrong, I believe. Hold on, I'll scroll down the bottom here. He's French. So I read it in an English, but I think Olivier Olivier. I'm very bad at, I'm barely good at English, and I'm fairly bad at pronouncing non-English or slightly non-English names. Something to think about there. Hold on. Let me mute things real quick. Too many things came in once. There we go. All right. Oh, I don't mind. I just jumped right into it. I usually banter a little bit. I usually banter a little bit more to let people join, because it always takes a few minutes. And I don't know, I have a shorter one I'm doing today because I'm going to head over to the IT in the D event, which is about 20 minutes from here. Let me pull that up for anyone who doesn't know what IT in the D is, because, you're not local. Why would you know what it is? I've been on their podcast before. They are friends of mine. Bob Waltenspiel runs this. They have some local events. They have some cool people involved. They have the Detroit Podcasting Company, and they hold local tech meetup events. So if you're in the Detroit area, they've been around since 2007, and they've had some pauses here and there, but pretty much they've been consistent with their events and meetups. And sometimes meeting people physically is kind of cool in the person. We utilize CloudStack for our as a service offering, and it's not trying to be full stack. We also use XOA since all of our hosts are XCP-NG. To me, they do two different functions. For us, we need both. Yeah, there's different options there. And TrueNAS does a lot more though than I don't know. It would be splitting hairs, but TrueNAS integrates a lot on top of Debian. It's very customized Debian. It's not just like Debian plus TrueNAS. They're doing a lot of customization, especially around what they include in Debian. That's why apt breaks things. You cannot apt update a TrueNAS server. It will explode. it will just fall apart on you. It will be bad. So it's a little not exactly the same comparison, versus the apt ecosystem is how Proxmox gets its updates. It's doing apt. That is a pretty huge difference between them. I just installed Proxmox. I was planning to do a VM of TrueNAS. I had to redo my home server anyways, wanted to try it. Yeah. I talk about doing VMs with your NAS, pass through the drives, makes your life easier, pass through the controller that controls the drives. It's a much better way to do that. And you have moved your Homelab over to Proxmox. You consider XCP-NG, but it would become way more complicated to control fan speeds, reduce noise as my Homelab sits next to you. Yeah, that can be a challenge if the support isn't there in the base OS. The base OS of XCP-NG is much lighter because it's not full on. It's an appliance. It's designed to be an appliance. It's not a full on distribution that has everything in it. Is XCP-NG any different than a distro tuned for virtualization? Unless you strip out the video, install many packages, a lot of work maintaining distros. Some say not worth it for 100K users. The tuned for distro is distro tuned for virtualization is kind of how I would describe Proxmox, versus XCP-NG is built for virtualization. It's a stripped down appliance at that point. I mean, it's essentially a derivative of it's a Red Hat or CentOS ecosystem underneath. So that's what the package management is based on, but they run the repositories. That's a lot of it. What it comes down to is who manages the kernel, the updates, or especially the entire update cycle. And that's where Zen completely manages the update cycle. Why not move beyond virtualization platforms and just use built-in CLI tools? Manageability is probably the biggest reason. It's the same reason we don't all write code in assembly language. At some point, it's not as easy to maintain, but it's certainly more efficient to do assembly language all the time. But not everybody can do assembly language. It narrows the scope of who can do it. And do we restrict it? So that would solve a lot of bad code problems. If you're good enough to write assembly, not to guarantee you're going to write good code, but you're going to have the bar of entry really high for developers if that's the requirement. All things must be written efficiently in assembly, and the UIs for these things allow you to orchestrate it. Could you absolutely write all your own Ansible scripts or any other, insert name of your favorite Linux automation methodology and build out a, command line driven orchestration tool? Absolutely. You can. How hard is that to manage? Well, there's a reason we have web UIs. We want things to be manageable, especially because a lot of times it's not that they're managed by people who manage that exact thing all the time. That's why you'll see someone dedicated in an enterprise environment to managing, let's say, Vios or one of the popular platforms for firewalls that are very command line heavy. It's not like I manage it once in a while. No, these people are dedicated. They're in there all the time. It is what they do, and therefore they get really good at it, and they're the only ones touching it when it's your job to do that. UniFi, for example, has become very popular because a lot of people don't spend all the time doing it. They want a firewall that works. It's way on the other side of things, of course, but they want a firewall that works. They want something that, I don't log into my UniFi every day, and I don't need to. Most of the time I'm doing other things and I want it to work. And if you don't do it every day, you may not be as proficient at it. But like I said, we're getting a lot of philosophy there. We all know AWS is based on Zen, but that's saying something like TrueNAS is just using Debian. It's kind of like saying AWS just uses Zen. Well, yeah, AWS is mostly Zen, but it's so customized. It's their own thing, and it's not open source at all, of course. Because I've not tried to do that, create a script for ILO4 to manage the fan control speeds. I don't know how hard that would be. It's Linux still, but yes. Here's a question. Your home DOCSIS internet connection is offline due to recent thunderstorm. Do you find yourself dealing with DOCSIS-based DIA circuit failures or customers often? Pretty rare. Very rare. Maybe it's just we don't have severe enough electrical storms here. Maybe it's because a lot of the cable is buried. I'm not sure. I don't I don't think I've had but a couple bad cable modems over the years. It's not a problem that's never happened, but it's not a problem that's frequently happened either. It's not that common. Your internet went out. UniFi gateway screen said contact ISP. I did. They said it was right on their end. Rebooting the gateway fixed it. Has you concerned? I could not access the gateway. Would need to know more. Did you try logging into it locally to see what was wrong? That's the first step I would do. For some reason, if it's not working on the cloud interface, I always try the local interface and go from there. You're still using Citrix, but you're messing around with XCP-NG at home. You're trying to get Citrix to work through the Entra application proxy. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't tested any of that. I'm partial to XCP-NG. I'm very familiar with it. I don't have any hate for Proxmox, but I find XCP-NG to be very solid and stable. It's what we deploy to our clients. It's what we've done a ton of VMware migrations with. So yeah. Local interfaces LAN IP, correct. You got nothing there. Couldn't ping it, reverse proxy and everything. Hard to say. The next thing is looking on the display to see what's wrong. If you can't ping it, something hung up. That's not a common condition. Generally speaking, I find the Ubiquity firewalls, especially their modern, well, going down wasn't the problem I really complained about with them. They were up. They just were not functional. They didn't have a lot of use because of the software wasn't great. Until version 9 is when I really think UniFi got good with the firewalls. Until then, their firewalls were, they routed packets. They just lacked features. The forbidden phrase, what is the best tool for? Yeah, I mean, sometimes the best tool is the tool you know. That is definitely the tool that's going to be much better for you. So the display said that. That's just strange that you couldn't ping it. I mean, were you doing it from local LAN, not on Wi-Fi? That's, an important aspect of it too, making sure that you are plugging in locally to the network. I think, and I don't remember what the default is. I think when there's no internet, it drops Wi-Fi. I think it's to get the devices to reset, but I don't know. I don't know. I know you can turn that off. I just don't remember where it is exactly, but you can look that up of tell UniFi not to shut off Wi-Fi when the internet goes out. That way things stay connected. I've got it set somewhere to tell my system not to do that. I just can't remember where that setting is. Now, another topic I have in the list here is endpoint security. I have a video coming up, and that's a good question right here. Good question right here. Hold on. Let me, I'm going to be doing a video, and it kind of relates to, let me find it. I like the wording on this. I'll answer this question before we get into the endpoint security. I did an upgrade in place of TrueNAS Scale to Fangtooth. Now the web UI is able to display users under credentials. Weird. No, I have not. Control F5 to make sure you cleared the cache, but I upgraded quite a few systems and I have not seen that problem reported. Not saying it's not a problem. I have not spent a ton of time in the forums, and I just haven't seen on any of the upgrades I've done. So check their forums, see if maybe someone's having that problem. I haven't looked at that, but I'm not a big fan of whatever HPE is doing. Do you choose a node that runs a certain VM in XCP-NG if you have 2 nodes with a GPU and 2 without? Managed migration. You can do an affinity to a host, so it would prefer that host. So that is an option you can do. Don't use Fortinet. We'll go with that. But there's a video I want to work on here to talk about kind of a story arc here of endpoint security and how it works. I think there's a combination of people not always understanding exactly what's going on. A lot of people see it as magic. Hello, Brett. I will see you tomorrow. But a lot of people see it maybe as magic, but it's not magic. It's threat detection. And I want to walk through a threat that a client of ours had that attacked the system. The threat actors got in for a few seconds, and it was through this ingress method. It was a new client, and there's a lot more to the story, of course. But what I want to point out is how the endpoint detections aren't, it's not AV anymore. It's not antivirus at all. It's all about detecting shady behavior. That's the best way I can describe what goes on here. And it's what the team at Huntress does. I happen to have some time. I sat hanging out with Kyle Hansevan, CEO of Huntress. He's someone I've known for a long time. I'm an early adopter of Huntress. There's what looks like a record album behind me. I've, completely full bias here. We've been using Huntress for like 8 years. I think we've been using Huntress. So I know them very well and I have a bias, but I'm going to talk in general how these things work. And this is a really important aspect where I think there's just a lot of confusion about what does the endpoint security really mean? What does it look like when an attack happens? And how is an attack detected, or what looks different? And this specific one here, the foundation server, something our client was running on here, was the ingress method. And people talk about, hey, can I just open this port to this software? Because that's exactly what the foundation software, which is a really popular tool. What is the name of the company here? They have a link on here. Foundation accounting software. So this is a very popular commercial program used by many CPA firms. I mean, this is huge. This is, accurately check the details of every job customized. This is America's #1 construction accounting software. You're not talking about some basic open source project here. You're talking about a large scale. They sponsor big giant events. I know that only because I happen to be at one of the I was at an event center, and just coincidental to the tech event going on at the same event center. They were, they even have a user conference. They were having a conference right next door. So you're not talking about some small company here. And it's really interesting because this company, let's go over here. There is, see if they have it in here. Essentially, they don't do good security modeling on the way they design their software. It's not great. So this allowed people, and I'll walk through the attack, but essentially they're going through and brute force logging into SQL Server, because it actually is exposing SQL Server so the app can get in, the app on the phone can get into this. And it's just a really interesting, popular app that you wouldn't think, okay, this app, they're just going to get access to the app. No, this gives them full shell on here. And the way endpoint detection response works, your EDR software, the Huntress tools we use, is they see it and they watch people doing something that seems not typical. So it's not just running SQL commands. You go, wait a minute, that port runs SQL commands all the time. And this is what they do. They're looking at the processes, and it's not the SQL commands that alerted them. It's what happened after. They see people running these things here. Let's go ahead and get, these information. This right here is enough to flag it right here. Whose account? They're enumerating here. It's looking at the commonalities along with the affected machines. It was apparent the attack was scripted as the same commands spread out across several unrelated companies with a span of a few minutes. And they're going through each of these steps because they're enumerating the network. They're taking a deeper look. This is not something the application should be doing. Why would the application want to know who am I or any of those tools? And the reality is it's the threat actors doing it. But I think it's just an interesting story arc of how this works. This is actually how a threat got through. But then what happens next after a threat gets through? Did you stop it? Well, yes. The good news is it's all about understanding what that threat was, recognizing that someone was enumerating the network, and then host isolating was the next step. Immediately, Huntress isolated the host and said, we're going to lock this thing down. We don't know why someone's doing this, so here's the lock button, and it blocks all access. And heuristics doesn't follow this. This is the challenge. We first had signature-based, that's your traditional antivirus. Then antiviruses got a little more fancy with heuristic analysis to try to figure things out. But it turns out eventually that just wasn't enough. Modern threats are a lot different. It's not about signatures. It's not about AV. It's all behavior analysis. That's what's really different about how, when they refer to proper EDR or endpoint detection response, it runs on the endpoint. We're detecting the behaviors of it. It's behavioral analysis, not heuristic analysis. And I think that's really just kind of interesting where we are today, is that we have to watch for behavioral analysis, and whether or not you know if that behavior is shady behavior or expected behavior is the difference between a false positive and a owned machine. So you're always on edge and making sure that you're making the right decision as a SOC analyst. And this applies as well for people who run, SOC security. They have to look through things, look at events, and decide, is that event normal? Is that event not normal? Is that someone doing something shady? Did so-and-so in accounting actually run Who Am I? Or is someone on that person's in accounting's system and ran it? And what are they trying to do? Those are the things that makes it really interesting to do. Yeah, and that's why we don't have to know how they got there all the time. That's later. The first thing we need to know isn't how they got there, but what they're doing. Once we isolate them from what they're doing, we can start reverse engineering how they got there. That's where all the logging comes in. That's what the forensics analysis is. Hey, someone's doing something shady. Stop it. There's your first step. Next step is how'd they get here? Because we can't remediate until we know how they got here. And this is where Huntress has a good breakdown. And it's just coincidental. We have a customer that was running the software that had the same problem. So this whole thing I want to put together is a walkthrough of how the event happened, how we remediated the event, just to teach people what endpoint security actually is in the modern context versus, the earlier days of just simple AV. And AV is still kind of a thing, but it's not really the thing. We still have some definitions because attacks are cumulative. Just because they're not as common by modern standards doesn't mean low-hanging fruit's not there. So you still should run some of those things. But that's a video I'm working on. Hopefully I'll get it done in the next few days, and maybe publish it next week. But yeah, I think it's going to be hopefully enlightening to talk to people about how that works. And a lot of it comes down to, and back to why I choose Huntress and why I still choose Huntress after all this time. Their threat team is top notch. They have top notch intel to be able to have, the term used in our industry maybe too much is eyes on glass. They have humans doing this. If you go to Huntress's website, one thing I will really say that they've done such a good job of this. If we go to everyone's website, we will see all kinds of BS. But you know what you're missing here? Show me where all the AI things are. I can't name another site I can go to about it. Matter of fact, they even say protecting your business like it's yours, but their branding, like at the events, is even, people-driven security. I just really appreciate that. They just don't have AI plastered all over the place. And that I can really appreciate that about them, because that's all these other companies, all they want to do is tell me how AI is solving the problems. No, it's not. Do we use Huntress and SentinelOne still? Yes, as of right now, we are still using both of those. I don't usually replace a Synology until it's out of support. So as long as that, I don't know what the end of life is for that model off the top of my head, but as long as the model is first doing what it needs to do, and second, not out of support. Oh, yeah, this is the whole thing. Exposing a database is a really bad practice. Absolutely. Who would expect a multi-million-dollar company to write software that's not properly exposing an authenticated API, but just having the phone app talk to the database? Who writes software like that? Oh, wait, multi-million-dollar companies. Oh, yeah, you're spot on though. You are completely right here. It is just a terrible design. It is just nothing good about that design. With the new changes in TrueNAS in regards to containers, would it not be a good idea for Vates to submit a Zen Orchestra container to TrueNAS to make it easier for XCP users to get started? I don't think so. I don't think that's the best place for it to live. I mean, they also don't offer any container. They don't do any service delivery via Docker. So they don't do Docker. Therefore, it's not theirs to submit. There's the way you submit some apps over to the folks at TrueNAS, to my knowledge, it has to be in Docker first. So because Vates doesn't maintain it in Docker, I don't see that happening. Now, there are other people maintaining Zen Orchestra and maintaining Docker, but it's not Vates doing it. That's not how their service delivery model works. I guess you have to redefine the word mostly. I believe the Zen hypervisor still accounts for, this was in the Zen meetup for Vates that talked about this before. It was around 85% is still Zen. So you're very wrong on that. It's not mostly custom KVM. Custom KVM is in there. It is the new thing they're rolling out, but it's not the majority. It's very far from the majority at the last Zen Summit. I think it's called Zen Summit they do. But yeah, it's still deeply there. It's I know they're offering it. It's just not. Matter of fact, I can tell you. So somewhere. I can't remember the article. I'm not going to spend too much time doing it. It's a specific section. It's like a very specific instance that you get KVM with in there. Hey, Tom, I really enjoy watching your videos and learning more about networking and how to configure firewall. Awesome. What do you prefer, Synology rack mount as opposed to desktop? There are different use cases. I mean, if the client has a rack mount, go for it. I like things in rack mount. I like them better than trying to set things on a shelf. But sometimes, especially in many small businesses, on a shelf is the place to put it. Yeah, the shelf mount models or desktop models are really fine. So yeah, noise. The rack mount models are generally noisier. So if noise is a constraint, that's another reason for that. At least the rack mount ones I've used, I've not used any of the, I don't often get the smaller models, but I still think even the smaller ones are still kind of noisy. The big ones definitely have plenty of fan noise, but the desktop models, on the other hand, not much fan noise. Definitely a lot better. The company running that accounting software, curious what firewalls they're running. Would an active threat feed have mitigated the problem? This is such a whack-a-mole problem that people talk about. There was actually, I think it was Huntress, one of my friends at Huntress, posting on his own account. I follow a lot of Huntress employs a lot of security engineers that I'm friends with, but the problem with the trying to make a list, is making a list of every known bad IP address is just too hard. There's so many people I see. We had someone that reached out to us talking about sponsoring, and it's all they do is blacklisting. And I'm like, they sell it for a lot of money because allegedly their blacklist is better than everybody else's blacklist. Cool. The reality is how things get on a blacklist. We find an IP address doing something shady. We add it to the list. How do you know when it's doing something shady? Well, that becomes fuzzy, but people like graynoise.io is a place that does it. They spend a lot of time, listening to the internet. For reference, it's spelled like this. Threw it in the list here, but Gray Noise listens to the internet and builds some of these lists. It's really cool, but it's hard. This is not. It may catch it. It may, but only if we know. And this is why I'm not bullish on that as a solution. It's not a bad layer of security, but it's not what I would call a robust layer of security. I'm all for blacklists and sinkhole lists or whatever you want to call them for things. But yeah, it has limited utility. Now, I think CrowdSec is pretty solid. I think there is a CrowdSec Pangolin integration. I'm pretty sure there is. I think that exists already. Right here. It's in their doc. There's a second link on a Google search. But yep, there you go. So you can integrate the two. Well, this is a whole other challenge. Yeah. You eventually run out of IPs, or what's been happening more often is you'll find that they're taking over commonly used IPs in Azure and AWS. And then you're like, crap, we're breaking other things. So you create new challenges. Yeah, it's a layer defense in depth. It's just not the one I would rely on. It's if you were saying which layer do you think is more effective, I'm not going to point to that one. That's definitely true. Matter of fact, one of the things, let me point this out here. This is fun. Not everybody knows this exists, but I helped with some of my friends build. I did the infrastructure for some hacking stuff that my friends were doing. This is a tool called Trevor Spray. And one of the things I pointed out here, and this is, let me find it here. Here is the solid use for IPv6. Really good use for it here. Trevor Spray is a tool that will do password spraying. By the way, it turns out if you sign up for insert name of whatever hosting service you want, Linode, I'm trying to remember the other one we used. We ended up using one of my other accounts. Anyways, I use Linode mostly. That's one on the top of my DigitalOcean, I think is where we actually did it. You get a whole lot of IPv6 addresses. The password spraying tools now support rotating. Let's say we know there's a lockout after 2 password attempts. So it'll do 2 password attempts on each IPv6 address it has available. So this is why I say things like, hey, did you know turning off IPv6 reduces your threat surface? And then the crowd goes anger at me going, Tom, you're ruining the internet. You're not allowing the adoption of IPv6. You're the problem, Tom. And I'm like, from a security standpoint, I'm 100% right, especially because I know you can password spray IPv6 and there's tooling already that will rotate through thousands and thousands of IPv6 addresses. Good luck blocking those. Because you can get and acquire them at a rate faster than you can block them. So fun times. Let's see. You have a friend that wants to install UniFi cameras in his work boat and connect them to his UNVR at the marina via VPN that UniFi cellular router sheet. I would not try to run. Are you trying to say connect the cameras? UniFi boat. Make sure the cameras and the NVR are on the same network. Don't try to push the cameras over the cellular. That would be bad. But you could certainly have an NVR on a boat. I know people who've done this, and NVR on a boat works. Just don't try to get the NVR off the boat. And cellular is not going to be incredibly fast, depending on the area you're in and whether or not they have 5G. So you got to remember, pulling video and watching it across cellular networks is, I mean, it works well if you've got a good area, but my experience is once you go to some of the more rural areas, I guess if you're in Florida where the yacht clubs are, is plenty, but I always think of boating in more rural areas where you don't have a lot of cell service. You have a WISP in your area and you have set up an edge router in load balancing mode without the failover option. Is it okay to split the connection rather than wait for failover? I guess, are you just trying to load balance it? You and send half the traffic where? What's the splitting that you're trying to do? Usually you pick a gateway that's default and you have the other one as failover. I don't know if the edge routers have a balancing option to split traffic. You can on the other ones. I haven't looked at the edge routers in a long time. But I am going to wind this down here because I was planning on going to the IT in a D event. And I don't think I'll have time this particular weekend to do another live stream, but I might do another. I like doing these live streams a lot. I couldn't decide when to do this one because I knew I was going to the event. Do I do it when I get back, or how long will I stay at the event? And but maybe I'll do another live stream on Sunday afternoon. I might have some time depending on the weather. Well, actually, very much. I heard the weather here. We're going to have an unusually warm Detroit this Sunday, which probably means Tom's not going outside. I don't really like the high heat, which is also one of the reasons I live in Detroit. So yeah, fun stuff. But thank you all for joining. Awesome for being. Oh, you know what? Someone had a good suggestion here. Starlink. Yes. Starlink is probably a great option for people. I as far as I know, Starlink works fine on boats. I don't know anyone with a boat with Starlink, but I don't also know a lot of people on the boat. So I think you can do that. That's a good Google search for you. But Starlink, it might be better for doing the connection than cellular. Just a thought. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.